How did the Timberwolves come back from down 19 against Wemby and the Spurs in the second half? We'll break down exactly how they cut into the Spurs deficit and the heroics of Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards down the stretch. Next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic weekend, and it is a victory Monday after a big Timberwolves win over the Spurs on Sunday. So much about this win that was impressive that we'll get into, but the heroics of Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards down the stretch, and something I don't know that I've ever said before, the heroics of Julius Randle defensively down the stretch in this game. Ant on offense gets the Wolves the win, a game the Wolves trailed by as many as 19-17 late in the third quarter, and they come back in the fourth. First, I'm going to break down some of the clutch stuff, both Randle and Ant. What was so impressive about the actual close of the game, because this was a true, like, a back and forth down the stretch. A lot of fun. And then we'll talk about how the Wolves hung around and really kind of whittled away at the deficit, ate away at the deficit over the course of the game. Really from like late second quarter, a lot of work throughout the third, how they hung around and eventually pushed ahead very late in this game. There's a number of things that a pretty interesting box score, right? Like some of the categories the Wolves lost dramatically and how they counterbalance that to be able to ultimately win this game. So a lot to get to. And of course, we'll close as always on the post-game pod with individual studs and duds. And also don't look now, but where the Wolves are in the West standings. We'll talk about that too. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So this game, partly why it was so impressive, this is second night of a back-to-back, and yeah, the Spurs played a back-to-back as well, but this is a full-strength Spurs team. Wemby starting for the first time in 10 days or so, but a full-strength Spurs team. And the Timberwolves playing in a back-to-back after a pretty frustrating loss against Cleveland on Saturday. It was a matinee, so they had a few hours extra rest, and they got to the Twin Cities, 6 hours or whatever earlier than the Spurs did. But, I mean, coming off of a home and home against the Cavs, which, we came into it saying, look, if the Wolves split this, it's fine. And they've won, 5 out of 6 now, and the broader picture is they still, I think, have the best record in the NBA since Thanksgiving. They've now beaten the Spurs twice, and it's important to note off the top here, the Wolves have already clinched the season series against the San Antonio Spurs, who they are right behind in the Western Conference standings. They're only playing 3 games. The Wolves have already won 2, and the first one came without Wemby, but, I mean, the Spurs have a good record without Wembanyama anyway. So 2 of the Spurs' 12 losses right now have come at the hands of the Timberwolves. They play them again actually this coming Saturday, but that will be immaterial to the actual tiebreaker because the Wolves have won the first 2 out of 3. So that's important as well. We'll talk about the standings here at the end of the game. Let's talk about the fourth quarter of this one, or I should say at the end of the podcast. Let's talk about the fourth quarter. So we'll talk about the comeback later, but the snapshot here is Minnesota got to within a point in the second quarter. Anthony Edwards got an and one, was at the line, and they had already been down double digits. They started this game losing 16-0. I probably should have said that even earlier in the show. They were down 16-0 in this game. Come all the way back. They're tied on an Ant free throw, but he misses it. We'll talk about the free throw shooting woes. It was miserable in this game. He misses the free throw, and the Spurs go on like a 19-5 run over the rest of the second quarter, and all of a sudden, at halftime, the Timberwolves are down 13. The lead balloons, or I should say the deficit from the Wolves' perspective, balloons to 19 points. It's still 17 points with about a minute to play in the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, mostly with Wemby off the floor, which they did a great job of taking advantage of the minutes when Wemby was not in the game. They, come all the way back. They get to within 6. Rudy Gobert commits a flagrant foul on a Wemby three-point attempt. He contests the first one. Wemby misses it. The Spurs get an offensive rebound. He contests the next one recklessly. Wemby lands on his foot, twists his ankle. He hits. It's just unbelievable. Gobert now will be suspended for the game on Tuesday because of his flagrant foul points, right? So Gobert gets suspended, commits a flagrant, which is 3 free throws in the ball for Wembanyama on a 3, and bumps into the referee as he's complaining or asking for the Wolves to challenge the call, and gets a technical. So it's a 4-point Wembanyama at the free throw line play, and Gobert gets suspended for the next game. Unbelievable. And then the game turns with Minnesota down 10. Julius Randle guards Wemby from basically the free throw line extended and pushes him all the way out of bounds. And he didn't actually push him, but because of the pressure he's putting on Wemby, Wemby's backpedaling and not traveling, but losing ground, essentially giving ground, and headed back towards the sideline, and eventually just falls over out of bounds onto the folks in the front row. And there's no foul. It's just a turnover because of the defensive pressure Randle was putting on Wemby. And the Spurs, from that point forward, the lead just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. The Timberwolves tie it on a Julius Randle 3-point play off of an offensive rebound to 3.5 minutes to play. And then there's a bit of a back and forth between Fox and Randle. Randle's actually providing a bunch of offense, both of those, a 3-point play and then another play to tie the game after a Fox bucket on the other end off of an offensive rebound. And then there's a back and forth. Ant hits a shot. Harrison Barnes hits a 3. Jaden hits a tough shot in transition, which was just a gutsy shot, but he didn't want to take on Wemby at the rim. So what did he do? He faded to 10 feet like he likes to do, hits the shot to put the Wolves up 1. But then De'Aaron Fox hits a jumper of his own. Minnesota's down 1 with 30 seconds to play. And then Ant hits a ridiculous shot. He gets the switch on Wemby. Randle does a great job holding his screen at the elbow. And Edwards hits a tough runner off the window around Wembanyama to put the Wolves up 1 with 17 seconds to play. And then Julius Randle puts the exclamation point on his defense that he played throughout the fourth quarter. For the most part, the Wolves had Julius Randle guarding Wemby one-on-one throughout the fourth quarter. And the physicality that he was playing Wemby with, it's a little bit like how Kat played Jokic and how Kat played Kevin Durant. Actually, is probably a better comp, where you just take the guy who's bigger, has a low center of gravity, and can just get into somebody, which, like, Kat's not a great one-on-one defender, but he was good in those matchups because he could just hold his ground and be physical enough and get called for a couple of fouls here and there, but he's going to do that anyway. So why not use them being physical? It's a little bit of a smaller version, a much lighter version of the Thunder's, hey, they're not going to call them all strategy, right? Like, if you foul on every play, they're not going to call a foul on every play. It's basically what OKC's strategy is, right? That's a little bit of what this was. Get into Wemby, make him feel uncomfortable. You might get called for a couple fouls, and Wemby's a really good free throw shooter. He's perfect for the line in this game. Make his life more difficult. And before the catch and then after the catch, just be as close to him as you can and be physical. And Randle did that. And on the final play of the game, after a timeout, Wemby was isolated on the right wing, really kind of free throw line extended high post area, and Randle was physical with him. Wemby tried to hit a tough pull-up jumper from, 17, 18 feet, and Randle got in his space, contested the shot. Wemby still almost made it. Would have been a game winner. He missed it. Cornette tips around the offensive rebound. Eventually it comes out to De'Aaron Fox, and he missed a 3 at the basically at the buzzer with about 2 seconds to play, and the Wolves hold on for a 1-point win. The fourth quarter, like, we're going to talk about everything that happened along the way. The fourth quarter belonged to Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards. Defensively, Randle was awesome. On the offensive glass, Julius Randle was awesome, and he was pretty quiet for most of the game. He finished with just 15 points, I think, in this one. Yeah, 15 points on 11 shots. A quiet offensive game for Julius, but he was essential on the offensive glass in the final 4 minutes of the game, and defensively was awesome against Victor Wembanyama. Ant wasn't super efficient in this game. Only made 1 3-pointer, and it didn't come until the fourth quarter in a big moment, but he missed his first, I think, 4 3-point shots. Didn't hit one until late in the fourth, and 23 points on 21 shots, only got to the line 5 times, missed 3 free throws. A kind of a weird Ant game, but down the down the stretch, Ant was great offensively when they needed him to be. He hit the tough ultimate game winner, and then before that, the tough right wing shot over Castle when he gives him the 2 small gesture. Both were great possessions by Anthony Edwards, and in between, you had the Jaden shot in transition, which was which was after a great Dante DiVincenzo rebound too, by the way. There was just a lot of kind of like in the like kind of ancillary stuff that happened. The Dante rebound and hit a head pass to Jaden, the Jaden shot that's going to get lost in this flurry of Randle and Ant, and understandably so, which that's why I led the show this way, right? Those guys were awesome down the stretch, but the Jaden shot was great. The DiVincenzo rebound was good. And we'll talk about Naz here in a minute. Naz Reid was a big reason why the Wolves made the push that they did a couple different times in this game. Second quarter, he kept him in it, relatively speaking. And then second half had a bit of a scoring flurry as well. So really kind of a hitting on all cylinders type of a comeback. There were a couple of areas the Wolves were really struggled in this game, like free throw shooting. We'll get into that, but they counterbalanced it by doing some other stuff really well. I thought it was a pretty unique kind of like team box score in this one. So we'll talk about some of those things here next. And then we'll close the show in a little bit with individual studs and duds. That's all upcoming next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel's making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, that's 5 to 6:30 Central Time, have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to your Friday night basketball viewing without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. That's 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. A big thanks once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And of course, thanks for helping to make the Locked On Network the #1 sports podcast network. We could not do without you, the everyday listeners. And if you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. Plus, you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the shows. Go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. That's lockedonwolves.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes. All right. So we talked about the fourth quarter. We talked about Julius. We talked about Ant. We talked about the big Jaden McDaniels moment. But throughout the game, there were some interesting things that went down. Here are the reasons the Wolves didn't win. Or I should say, sorry, Wolves did win. But the reasons why the Wolves were in position to win the game at the end. Number one, Minnesota did not turn the ball over at a rate that we're used to seeing in this game. Like, they only turned it over 9 times. They gave themselves as many bites at the apple as possible. And yeah, they struggled from the field early in the game, and there were some moments that weren't great. They shot we'll get to the free throw line here in a second. They didn't shoot free throws well, but not turn it over gave them that many more bites at the apple. It helped them overcome some of the other issues we'll get to. The points in the paint. Not what you'd expect in a game that Minnesota only won by a point, a relatively low-scoring game, 104 to 103. And Wemby was involved, right? So you wouldn't expect the Timberwolves won the points in the paint battle, but they did. They won it 50 to 32, a plus 18 points in the paint. Now, they didn't do a great job contesting threes, especially early in this game. San Antonio shot the ball well from deep. That's all true. And the Spurs, they're not, Wemby doesn't play really in the post all that much anymore, right? That's not a huge piece of what he's trying to do. He's doing more on the perimeter. They got a lot of guys that are doing stuff from the outside, but they actually did a pretty good job of making De'Aaron Fox's life more difficult, making Stephon Castle's life more difficult. And it led to a decent amount of free throw attempts for the Spurs. But in general, winning the points in the paint battle by 18 is going to help you a lot. The Wolves also made enough threes in this game. Ultimately, they were 12 of 39. The Spurs were 13 of 38. So they basically pretty close to canceled out what San Antonio did outside the arc. And given how slow Minnesota started from deep, they missed their first, dozen shots from the field. It's great that they ended up shooting 31% even from deep in this game. So they did enough outside the arc. And then lastly, they won the non-Wembanyama minutes by 16. Wemby was a plus 17 in this game. Nobody else on the Spurs was better than a plus 7 in a game that they lost by 1. And like every time Wemby left or was on the floor, it was like, I think it was right before halftime. They said on the Wolves broadcast that Minnesota was shooting like 3 of 20 when Wemby was on the floor, which is just nuts. And I don't know what it finished at, but I do know that the Wolves were 16 points better when Wemby was off the floor versus when he was on the floor. And you have to, it's just like when you play Denver, you got to win the non-Jokic minutes, right? And Minnesota won the non-Wemby minutes. That's the only way that they had a shot in this game, and they did it. Thankfully, Wemby could only play 27 minutes. I say that, like, obviously, it'd be great for basketball if Wemby could play more than 27 minutes, but the Spurs aren't letting him do it, and that helped the Wolves a great deal in this game. Why didn't the Wolves win by more? Well, it counteracted some of the miserable stuff that happened, like the free throw shooting. The Timberwolves are 14 of 25 in this game at the line. That's horrendous, 56%. The Spurs and Wolves both shot 25 free throws. The Wolves had 8 less points at the line. So they were a -8 at the line because they just couldn't make free throws. And they were a -3 outside the arc. That's 11 points less. They made up for it with the points in the paint and with some of that clutch play from Anthony Edwards. That was like they had to win the points in the paint. They had to not turn the ball over to give themselves more possessions to make up for all the problems they're having at the free throw line. I thought the Wolves did a pretty good job at pushing the pace when they got the opportunity. They tried to do that against Cleveland on Saturday, and it eventually kind of led to things getting away from themselves a little bit. But against the Spurs, like that strategy actually kind of made sense. There were some good small ball moments with Rudy off the floor in the fourth quarter. Weirdly, in this game against the Spurs, like having Gobert off the floor made more sense. And going small with Nas and, going small with Nas and then Jaden at the 4 worked really well. And then Randle came back down the stretch and had those big plays that he had. But Nas played better than Julius Randle for the majority of this game. Nas Reid had some really strong minutes. We'll talk about Nas in studs and duds. But Nas had some strong minutes in both halves of this game and was a big reason why the Wolves were as close as they were. I thought that the way that I should note, Micah Nori led things for the Wolves in this game. Chris Finch missed due to illness. So Chris Finch wasn't even on the bench. But I thought Micah Nori did a really good job with the substitution patterns in this game. And Minnesota was pretty intelligent with how all that worked out. So the avoiding the turnovers, winning the points in the paint, making just enough threes, and winning the non-Wemby minutes helped to counteract the terrible free throw shooting and the bad defense early in the game. I thought Minnesota actually, the defense in the second half was really good for the Timberwolves. They were flying around. They were being physical with Wemby. They were doing a pretty good job at shoring up the glass. They only gave up total for the game 10 offensive rebounds to the Spurs. Like, you'll live with that. That was really good for the Timberwolves. And it led to a really strong close for Minnesota because they were being so physical defensively. And the Wolves bench was just better than the Spurs bench. The Spurs have a pretty deep team. Keldon Johnson's a nice player off the bench. Luke Cornett's been good for them. Dylan Harper was not good in this game for the Spurs, but Nas off the bench was awesome. And the Wolves got some good moments from Bones Highland. It was a very typical Bones Highland game. And like, he's not going to hit studs and duds. And yes, he was a plus 16, second best mark on the team, believe it or not. But he had a couple possessions where he's just pounding the basketball into the floor and finishes it with a crazy shot. But he made a couple threes in big spots and, had 10 points on 8 shots, which is very Bones Highland. No assists, 1 turnover, but was a plus 16. It's just this weird, like, dozen minutes that Bones gives you that actually kind of works out. And there you go. You end up with the Wolves in position to win the game down the stretch. Some Ant heroics and some Julius Randle heroics as well. I want to close the show today by talking individual studs and duds. We'll also peek at the West standings. And man, the Wolves are in a really nice spot as of right now, given what we've seen from this team, given some of the valleys that they've been through in the first few months of the season. We'll break all that down here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Game Time. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. And that's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and should instill confidence in you when you use Game Time. The prices also include fees up front, my favorite feature, and that helps you know that what your total is and helps make it clear from the start. Plus, great features like zone deals will help unlock great seats at even better value. Maybe it's an NBA game. Timberwolves, I guess, just back in town for the one game, but we'll be back later in the week. Or maybe it's just another live event. Whatever the case might be. It could be another sport. It could be, theater or music or whatever the case might be. Everything is right there in one place. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today and get in on the action. All right. Let's talk individual studs and duds, and then we'll talk about the standings. So we got to go, the two guys that I spent a lot of time talking about already, Anthony Edwards, just because the Wolves, and honestly, Ant wasn't shooting the ball great. I think he said something similar post-game to the folks in the locker room that he wasn't really feeling it today offensively, right? But he hit those two huge shots in the final minute, and they don't win this game if it's not for Anthony Edwards. And overall, he had 23 points. Donte DiVincenzo had 19. Nobody else had more than 15. I'm sorry, Nas had 17 actually. So this was actually a fairly well-balanced scoring night, but the clutch play of Ant, plus some of the shots he hit earlier in the game, tough, being physical offensively was important. He also had 3 assists and 0 turnovers. So a no turnover game for Anthony Edwards is great to see. Only 2 rebounds, but I mean, he deserves a stud because the clutch play was great. And the overall offense was just this was a ho-hum game for him, and he still turned in 23 points and no turnovers. That's a pretty valuable game. You got to go Julius Randle. And I typically don't, this is a full game award, right? And a bucket in the first quarter counts the same as a bucket in the fourth quarter, technically, right? So I usually, it's more of a whole body of work within the game, but because of how Julius Randle was down the stretch on both ends of the floor, I got to give Julius Randle a stud in this game. He was awesome. We talked about the offensive rebound and 3-point play, and then the next time down, another offensive rebound and a bucket to tie the game again, plus the defense on Wemby throughout the fourth quarter, and especially on the final possession of the game. And also the pivotal possession with 7 to play when they had just gotten down 10 after the Rudy Gobert apocalyptic possession where he gave up the 4 points to Wemby, gets himself suspended and a technical, the whole thing. And Julius Randle locks up Wemby, makes him fall out of bounds and turns him out. Julius Randle was awesome in the fourth quarter of this game. So both Randle and Edwards deserve recognition for their play in clutch time. The third stud is a bit trickier between Donte DiVincenzo and Naz Reid. I'm going to go Naz Reid. Donte was good, but Naz was essential when the Timberwolves were trying to cut into lead, especially in the third quarter. Naz went on a little bit of a run of his own in the third quarter. I think I've got the kind of sequence here, but he was, Minnesota was down 17. Naz hits a 3. Castro hits a couple of free throws. Naz hits another 3. A couple of possessions later, Naz hits another 3 toward the end of the quarter. Ultimately, Minnesota cuts it down to 14 by the end of the end of the third. He got it from 17 to 14 with that bucket that he made late I guess it got to 12. Anyway, he had 3 big threes toward the end of the third quarter and was good in the fourth quarter as well. Good Naz Reid moments in this game. He finishes a team best plus 23 in 31 minutes, which we saw the opposite in the early stages of the season from Naz Reid. His on off, his plus minus, all that stuff wasn't very good. It was awesome in this game. 17 and 11. Couple of steals and a block, so 3 stocks. He was active defensively, active on the glass in a game where that was going to be really important. The Wolves edged out the Spurs on the glass in this one. And I thought this was just a really solid all-around Naz Reid performance. So he gets the third stud. Donte was really good, and the Wolves relied so heavily. They're relying so heavily on their starting backcourt. I mean, DiVincenzo and Edwards both played 38 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back, and Mike Conley and Bones Highland each played 12 minutes, right? It's the reason why there's a real chance the Wolves do something at the deadline. I don't think they're going to they're not going to go, the big splash, John Morant, I don't know, in Darius Garland, big swing situate like that. That's not going to happen, but they may try and do something, because if they're not going to trust Conley or Bones to play more than 12 minutes, and I wouldn't, honestly, like Jalen Clark's not really a true guard in the way he plays. He plays offensively like a big, like they're going to need another guy. They just are. And, to bump Conley or Bones to the fringe of the rotation instead of like, hey, you're an important part of the rotation, but you can still only play 12 minutes, right? They basically got 6 guys they trust right now. That's going to be a problem. And again, more back-to-backs moving forward than what we've seen for the first part of the season, although they've handled the last couple pretty well last weekend and this weekend. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. No real duds in this game. Conley was his typical quiet self, but I thought he played well in his 12 minutes. We talked about Bones already. He was fine. Jalen Clark was good. No duds. I thought Gobert, like, he only had 2 points. He had the dumb play that he had. He was a minus 14, but he was important on the glass. I thought he had some good possessions against Wemby. I don't know. Like, I don't think he was a dud. I thought he was fine. Obviously that one possession was terrible, but no duds in this game for me. All right. So that's it. The Wolves win this one by 1. They win the season series against the Spurs. That's huge. Peeking at the Western Conference standings. This is fun. Looking at it right now, this is after all the action concludes on Sunday. Okay. So up to date through the games on Sunday. Minnesota is now 4th in the Western Conference. Don't look now. 4th in the Western Conference. They are a game ahead of the Lakers, who they've lost to twice. The Lakers finally, their point differential, their negative point differential is catching up to them a little bit. They're a game and a half clear of the Rockets, who have lost 2 straight. And of course, Minnesota sees Houston for the first time in the season later this week, I think on Saturday. They're only a half game behind Denver for 3rd in the West. Jokic, of course, still out. Denver's kind of treading water so far with Jokic out. I think perhaps they're going to have some, rough road ahead here in the next couple of weeks. Minnesota's only a game and a half behind San Antonio with the tiebreaker. So don't look now. It's not an easy schedule, but the Timberwolves are 4th in the West, and they're closer to the 3 spot than they are the 5, and they have the tiebreaker over the 2. This is a big week for Minnesota if they can kind of keep some of this momentum going. It's obviously not an easy game at Milwaukee on Tuesday, especially without Rudy Gobert. Could we see Jean Beringer rotation minutes? Possible. I don't know what else you're going to do. There's no Luka Garza anymore, right? So they have Milwaukee on Tuesday. The Houston game's Friday. I beg your pardon, not Saturday. So they have Houston Friday, an ESPN game. 2 big games, winnable games on the road, but difficult games. At Giannis Tuesday, at the Rockets Friday, and then the back-to-back against San Antonio on Saturday. I mean, honestly, winning 2 out of 3 of those, and of course, so beating Milwaukee, really, and then splitting Houston and San Antonio is what's going to have to happen if you're the Wolves, and you're going to have a good week. But things are not easy, right? Milwaukee, back-to-back Houston, San Antonio, then you get at Utah next week, home for Chicago, 2 against, I don't want to say a reeling Golden State team, but a Golden State team that the Wolves should beat twice. And then at Dallas, home for OKC, and things lighten up a little bit with a couple of Memphises and a New Orleans and a Clippers on the docket as we get into February. So it's certainly more difficult than what a lot of November, December looked like for the Wolves, and in terms of back-to-backs as well. But so far, so good. The Wolves have won 5 out of 6, and all of it except Washington coming against above 500 competition against good teams. So a lot to talk about as we move forward in this week. Tomorrow we'll preview the game against Milwaukee. We just saw the Bucks a couple of weeks ago, just before Christmas, but that was a Giannis-less Bucks team, and this Bucks team will have Giannis. So we'll talk about that matchup on tomorrow's show, as well as some newer lineup data. We haven't looked at lineups here in depth in a little while, so we'll do all that on tomorrow's show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. And of course, if you haven't already, you can go sign up for the Everydayer Club. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. And if you're watching on video, we'll send you after this show to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel on audio. If you're listening on audio, make sure that you make your second listen the NBA Game Night Show over at Locked On NBA. Of course, the show is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.